I guess we can go on to Inspector now.
Yeah, what were your thoughts?
So, um, I actually, I'm kind of mid on this one. To be absolutely honest, I'm kind of mid. I'm intrigued and I would like to see where it goes, but at the same time, I'm definitely not like eager to get back to the show. Um, uh, Iwanaga, that's her name,
Yep.
right? Iwanaga? Iwanaga. That's my favorite character, and she happens to be the main character, so that's even great. I love her comedy. I just love her character in general. The show does have, I'm not gonna say gloom. It has like an air of mystery, and I think that like the way that it is animated also gives that. Seems like there's like a constant fog, no matter where they're at. And I don't know if that's just me or if everything seems to be like a little bit grayed out, but I don't know. It kind of gave the show like a oh, what's gonna, anything could happen at any moment, blah blah blah. But then at the same time, I'm getting more like comedy elements for it, or that's what I remember it for more than the other things. When she sat there and talked to that snake for like an episode and a half, I was like, okay, so this is not what I expected. What I expected from this show was like, hunting yokai, running from yokai detectives or some shit like that, and shonen, some action, something. And we kind of get that, but the majority of it is exposition, and I'm kind of just like, okay. I was intrigued at the end of the third episode where they were bringing the ex fiance back into the plot, and I was like, oh, this is getting messy. I can see this getting really messy. I was like, now, I might come back for it. I might not. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm really mid on it. Like, I'm really just like undecided. It's not doing anything revolutionary enough for me to basically be like, oh my God, like I can't wait. Like, oh my God, you guys already went and finished it. It was fucking amazing. You need to watch it. Like, I kind of was just like, huh. I could see myself coming back and finishing it over Millionaire Detective. I can definitely say you that. But
Yeah,
other than
I'm
that,
in the same
like
boat.
music very unforgettable. I will say the opening and the ending, when like Iwanaga and Kuro, like in the opening it's Iwanaga being left by Kuro, and then in the ending it's Kuro being left by Iwanaga. I was like, ooh, is that like important? Is something gonna happen? Are they gonna end up like separate? Those visuals seemed important to me, but I mean, it was also still the very beginning of the show, so I was like, I don't know. Like, they're probably not going to even expand or reach that storyline until the second half, anyways. But that's kind of all that really stood out for me. The little action scene that like Iwanaga had with the what's that called? What, Miss Kanase, the steel beam girl?
Yeah.
That was interesting. And I was like, oh, okay. So is this what we're going to be doing? But then also, are we going to be doing more of the talks with other yokai that are very similar to the water serpent? Because honestly, the water serpent thing almost made me fall asleep. Like, it almost made me fall asleep. Because I was waiting for them to get up and do like some actual like research, and for her to like call on other yokai and basically be like, hey, can you go search this? Hey, can you go do this? Hey, this yokai is actually able to connect with the physical world doing this, so this is how I find out about these things. Like, that's what I was expecting from the show, and it's kind of there, but it's not there enough for me to basically be like, oh, I love this. I love seeing all the little powers and what they can do. And da-da-da-da-da. I was kind of just like, girl, you sitting here talking to this damn snake. Like, I ain't got time for this.
No, I feel you. I think I'm in the same boat. Uh, I'm mid on it, but I actually went and just watched the whole season because I was
Mm-hmm.
curious, not necessarily because I was like super invested in what was going on, but so to piggyback, I would say that it felt from the first episode like it was going to be a very specific kind of show. And you mentioned like this sort of like yokai detective type uh show plot, episodic nature, whatever. I
Uh-huh.
was ready for that. I was like, okay, I kind of like these characters. I kind of like their presentation, the world that they're in. It's nothing. They're not introducing any like tremendous stakes to drive the action or anything, but it was pleasant enough and jarring enough in the first episode where you kind of go from like cutesy to a dude getting his arm torn off in a spray of blood. where I'm like, there's some
Yeah.
edge to this, and the writing for the characters, like character interaction, is actually really really good for the type of show that it is. So I was with it. So I watched the second episode. That's the snake episode, where it's very dialogue heavy, and it seemed to be a different sort of show. And so because those two episodes were very different from each other, I said to myself, okay, well, maybe it's very episodic in nature, and that there might be a lot of variation in terms of what you're going to get episode to episode. And I kind of like those sorts of approaches to storytelling,
Uh huh.
especially where it's like around like mysteries and murder and other things like that. To like you kind of get a different flavor. It interestingly, I'm watching uh, Lovecraft Country, and each episode of that is kind of like an homage to a different type of film. So like horror, some are horror, but there was an episode that was very Indiana Jones. So like I like it when like directors or writers play with like motifs. So I was like, all right, cool, whatever. Having watched through the whole season and then gone back and done a little bit of research uh, about the show and about the light novel and the manga that it's adapted from, I
Yeah.
fall into the camp of it probably is the sort of thing that was very popular, but is not necessarily filmable or adaptable in an anime. So what I mean by that is when once you get past the third episode, so you kind of have you've had three stories so far. You get the introduction of the characters meeting in the first, and that the yokai in the library. Then you get the snake episode, which is all about like sort of appeasing a serpent's curiosity about an event that happened, and it's sort of litigated, right? Because the Iwanaga is just having a conversation with the serpent, trying to calm it down or make it satisfied with the story. But the story turns out to be somewhat fabricated, or at least she's making up a lot of it. So that's interesting. I'm like, oh, all right, cool. And then you get this third story about uh, the ghost with the steel beam that's like killing everybody, who may be a
Yeah.
idol who committed suicide or died. The problem is that that third story winds up stretching for another like 9 episodes, and
Uh,
that does not work at all. I think for the show, there's so much exposition, and they're trying to cram a lot of ideas into this. And the problem that I think I had having now finished the season is that the light novel most likely, like everything that happened that I just described, probably works in the context of the light novel, where like the first couple chapters were most likely introducing these characters so that they could get to this first main story of decoding and unraveling this ghost mystery around the idol with the steel beam before it became a killer. And that works for the novel, but I don't think that that necessarily works for the structure of a seasonal anime. I also don't necessarily think that all the exposition, as interesting as the characters are, and as I wound up at the end of the first three episodes and at the end of the season liking all the characters, feeling that they were natural, they were 2 dimensional at least, and that their interactions made sense. And there were some like comments and conversations that happened that I was very surprised would even be in an anime, um, which is good.
oh.
Surprising and adult. But besides that, it just felt like a adaptation that was struggling to like fit whatever was in the light novel and manga into the confines of an anime, and it didn't really work. Like having 9 episodes on this story, it could have been 3 episodes, and then they're on to the next one. The other thing that I was thinking about after some reflections, that like it reminded me a little bit of Noragami, but the difference with Noragami, number one, is that they're much better animated, and
Oh.
it's more action heavy, and is action heavy from the
Absolutely.
beginning. But also, Inspector doesn't really do any world building whatsoever. It does like it's very apparent, especially when you get through or you're in the midst of this the sort of main story of this idol, um, that you don't really know anything about what like the rules of this world really are. And even though the exposition is giving you a lot of it, it's literally a situation of tell not show when it should be show not tell, and it just doesn't. The pacing is all off. Everything is wrong. And then the more I thought about Noragami and the parallels there, the more I realized like why I am a little irritated that the first episode was paced the way it was, because I think it set an expectation for the series that is totally wrong. This series is basically about Iwanaga going around and litigating to various like people or spirits stories to explain and resolve conflicts. That's it. The whole last arc, which is very interesting, deals with this idea of like the power of the internet to, you know, create false narratives and false realities. And I really, 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 really like that story. I like what they were trying to say about it. I like their messaging. I like the ideology. I like the conversations that were had. I just don't think it should have been an anime. It should have been something else.
Wow.
It probably was perfectly fine as a light novel, to be honest. And then when we doing a little bit of research ahead of time, this was one of the most popular manga from 2018, like winning awards and all this other stuff. So I can only presume that this was on the basis of the writing, because the rest of the production didn't do anything. And then the last piece was, we talked about music a little bit before. They have one main theme, and it's a fine, lighthearted, like interesting to listen to main theme that they will play over various parts of the story. But that's like the only theme they have. And so there are
That's not
times when things are happening that are like tonally very different from the tone of the main theme, and they'll be like playing the main theme behind it. And I'm just like, they just did not spend the time or energy on like the sound, because there's basically in a show where everyone's always talking and everything, and there's very little action, the music winds up carrying a lot of the, you know, the emotional weight of what's going on. And when you just have like one main theme that gets repeated, I started to like want to like tear my eyes out of my head, because like I'm hearing this like lighthearted bouncy melody. Meanwhile, the main character just had his head smashed in, right? Like, it's crazy. So super mid. If you're gonna, my recommendation is the first 3 episodes are fine. They're actually pretty entertaining, and like the last 2 episodes are fine and pretty entertaining. So you could probably actually just afford to skip the middle of the season, and you don't really miss very much unless you really like the character interaction with like Iwanaga and Saki and Kuro, who are all pretty good and interesting. Or probably maybe read the light novel. I'm not going to read it because I don't read light novels, but it seems like it's really good. So yeah, that's all I got.
That's all I got too.